Sudden explosion of artificial intelligence has left some Christians pondering the moral implications of this ever-expanding technology. CBN's Billy Hollowell has the story.
When it comes to the true size and scope of artificial intelligence, the future is anything but certain. Promises of profound technological advancement come alongside fear over job loss and lapsed ethics.
Well, one of the problems of the whole issue of artificial intelligence is that landscape could change before I get to the end of this sentence.
Dr. Albert Mohler, president of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, says new moral dimensions surrounding AI emerge as fast as the technology evolves.
This is a truly frightening prospect. And I don't say that about everything. What we don't know, we don't know. And this really is setting something loose in the lab.
Mohler urges Christians to pay close attention to the claim AI could potentially develop a form of consciousness.
There is no such thing as a feeling machine. There may be a machine that mimics feeling. We're not merely feeling machines. We're not merely machines that mimic feeling. We're made in God's image. And so there has to be a distinction there, but keeping that distinction straight. And by the way, defending human dignity is going to uniquely fall upon Christians because the world is cashing out its ability to argue for human dignity.
Author Jeff Kinley agrees and adds a warning about allowing AI to diminish human purpose and value.
Obviously, one of the biggest concerns is that it replaces human intelligence. I mean, we are moving as a society towards replacing humanity just about every way possible, replacing human labor, human thought, human writing, trying to pretty much put humanity to the margins of the narrative here.
Unrestrained surveillance and the ability to hack the human brain are two potential concerns. Kinley, however, calls censorship and informational control the more immediate threats.
The idea of deception, because artificial intelligence is not human intelligence, and so there's the obviously the capacity for a lot of bias in there, pre-scripted inherent bias, but also just the idea of putting out a false narrative, and someone says, "Hey, the AI must know more than me, so I'm going to trust the AI more than the people," who could be called conspiracy theorists.
Christian apologist Alex McFarland echoes these concerns and says it all comes down to who's programming the systems and how they're used.
Technology is generally amoral. Computers aren't necessarily good or bad, but what you do with them. You know, on the moral issues, Christians need to be very concerned about AI because so much of the code and the algorithms that run the internet come from the souls and minds of Silicon Valley liberals.
While the overall impact depends on human intention, there are also positive opportunities. Some experts are using the tech to improve human health and well-being, and Christian groups are translating the Bible into new languages with it. Author Johnny Moore, among others, believes America must pause, reflect, and offer moral leadership to ensure the right path forward.
All the good and the bad of it is going to be realized by us. The decisions we make now will determine the lives our children will enjoy, and this is the moment to press pause, to gather together, to ask the right questions, and to make sure the United States isn't just leading in technology, but that we're leading with our values too.
Only time will tell if these warnings are heeded. Billy Hollowell, CBN News.
National security correspondent Caitlin Burke is here now to discuss this further. Caitlin, now that the AI race is in full swing, the global powers, they're exploring how to use the technology on the battlefield, including Israel. So what are some of the ways the IDF is using artificial intelligence in its military operations?
Chris, it's hard to get a clear answer on the specifics because it's all highly classified. But we do know AI systems are being used to select targets for airstrikes and to calculate how much ammunition will be needed, give drones their targets, and propose schedules. Right now, it all must then be reviewed by a human before being deployed. We also know the use of AI in military operations has been on the table for a while for Israel. Back in 2021, the IDF described the 11-day conflict in Gaza as the world's first AI war. Now, the use of this technology in a military context is still pretty controversial. Supporters say things that used to take hours now take minutes, and it has a huge potential to reduce civilian casualties. But others are concerned that relying on autonomous systems could have deadly consequences if its calculations are off.
Yeah, I remember that war back in Gaza, talking about the first AI war. So what role does the U.S. military play in this, especially since Israel is its biggest defense partner in the region?
Well, the U.S. is investing heavily in military applications of AI, but has been slower to actually deploy it. There's not much regulation over these kinds of weapons, which is a concern among many in both the U.S. and Israel. We're also not actively engaged in a conflict right now, so there's been a bit more of a focus on developing weapons to combat AI systems that are being used against our allies, Israel and Ukraine, for example. But because of our partnership with Israel, it's safe to say that we are learning from how they're using artificial technology in combat. And it's pretty much a done deal that this will be the future of warfare for all of us.
Yeah, I know from a military perspective, there's such a close relationship between the United States and Israel, and now especially here in the AI field that we're in now. Caitlin, thanks for your analysis.
My pleasure.
Coming up, churches set ablaze and homes destroyed. The shocking violence targeting Christians in Pakistan. Christians in Pakistan are now worried for their safety after Muslim rioters descended on their community last week, burning dozens of churches and homes. It happened in the eastern province of Punjab. Scenes from the Rampage making international headlines as the mob attacked at least 26 churches and drove Christians from their homes. This in response to allegations that a Christian man desecrated the Quran, a violation of Pakistan's blasphemy laws.
Look at our houses, look at our churches, look at our street. If someone did wrong, arrest them. What is our fault? Why are our houses and churches being burned? We want justice.
Christians took to the streets to protest against the persecution and targeted violence. Police say they've arrested more than 100 rioters. The government has promised money for victims of the rampage, but the trauma of the attack leave wounds money can't address. Well, Dan Andros, managing editor of CBN's Faithwire, has been tracking this story. Dan, this recent rampage, was it an anomaly, or are these events becoming more common?
Well, Chris, attacks against individual Christians in Pakistan are pretty common. I mean, it's ranked the 7th worst country by persecution watchdogs to live in as a Christian in the whole world. So they're no stranger to that. It is a little more uncommon to have something of this happen, especially to the widespread nature of it with 26 churches, as you mentioned. And just the mere fact of going after the buildings, doing it as a lot of them, that is definitely a little more rare in spite of the general persecution that happens there in Pakistan. So that kind of escalation in the violence is definitely concerning.
So what's triggering this hostility, Dan, towards these Christians?
Yeah, well, in this particular case, as you mentioned, there's an accusation of blasphemy. They said a Christian and his friend had torn pages out of the Quran, which they count as blasphemy. And so they're saying that that's the excuse that they're using for going ahead and triggering it. But really, these archaic blasphemy laws in Pakistan, which were sort of updated in the 1980s to be a little more vague and a little more able to use, what they end up doing is the 96% Muslim majority there. It's less than 2% of the people in Pakistan are Christians, and they're often treated as second-class citizens. And so what the rest of them do is if they have a dispute, hey, you get in an argument with your Christian neighbor over a fence, well, you use these blasphemy laws and accuse them of blasphemy, and it gets them into the court and everything else. And there's never really any retribution to the people who levy the accusations. It all comes down on those having to defend themselves against these blasphemy laws. Oftentimes, they could be even facing up to death.
Yeah. Well, we mentioned that the government's maybe compensating some of the Christians, but what else is the government doing to protect the Christian community in the Punjab province?
Yeah, well, they're really standing in solidarity with them. This is really actually a noteworthy event because, as I said, 96% Muslim. You're not often going to be catering to this. It's not a popular move in the country to be standing shoulder to shoulder with Christians. The government officials there went to a church to make these statements saying, hey, we stand with these people. We're going to go after those who did this. They have arrested 160 so far. We'll see if the charges stick and they actually get any convictions here. And they did give $6,800 to each homeowner who had their home damaged or destroyed, which doesn't sound like a lot. It does go farther in Pakistan than it does here. But this is kind of a radical step for a country like Pakistan.
Yeah. Finally, Dan, what can the international faith community do to support these Pakistani Christians?
Yeah, we need to be praying for our brothers and sisters in Christ there in Pakistan. That is first and foremost. Our first line of defense as Christians is we can pray and then look to support any churches or organizations that are assisting physically on the ground there. Because as I said, these Christians are definitely facing daily attacks. It's very common there, and they're tired. They're exhausted from having to deal with this.
Well, Dan, thanks for bringing this story and your insight analysis so people can learn about it and pray about it. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Still ahead, a South Korean prayer movement reaches the United States Capitol. The reason for these protests when we come back. Thank you for watching Jerusalem Dateline. We're committed to providing you with unbiased reporting from the Holy Land. Through weekly broadcasts, podcasts, and online media, our vision is to reach millions around the globe with the true story of what's happening in Israel and the Middle East, all from a biblical and prophetic perspective. This is a big vision and is only made possible by the generous support of people like you.
Call us toll-free at 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com/Jerusalem Dateline and make a donation that will help spread the light of truth about Israel throughout the world.
Earlier this month, I visited South Korea, where Christians are praying every day for the freedom of their northern neighbors. That initiative made its way to the United States Capitol this week. On Wednesday, members of Korea's Esther prayer movement rallied outside the Chinese embassy, demanding that Beijing not send 2,600 defectors back to North Korea. Representative Chris Smith, co-chair of the Congressional Commission on China, joined the protest.
Every one of these refugees have hopes and aspirations, a life story, loved ones. We care about them. We're calling on the ambassador. We're calling on here in Washington. We're especially calling on Xi Jinping. Abide by international law. Send them to a country that will welcome them.
China refuses to grant refugee status to the North Korean defectors that escaped to its territory. Instead, many are deported back to North Korea to face severe punishment. Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. You can also access CBN content through our CBN apps and email blast. And it's been great to be here in the CBN studio doing Jerusalem Dateline. We look forward to do it again. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.